Welcome to Mind Fitness Warriors, an online interview series where we are chatting with those who have gone through the deepest valleys of mental health and risen out the other side, who have real, raw stories and experiences to share with you. And we get to hear about their holistic approach to a fit and healthy mind. So today I am so honored and excited to introduce our guest speaker. We have Nadia Mastroianni. I got her last name right this time. Here with us today. And Nadia is a powerful millennial who runs her own business at the age of 21, who, when I met you, Nadia, you were probably 18, maybe 19.
I think around 18, 19, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I remember when I first met you, you were really struggling with your anxiety and just social anxiety and just kind of being out there. And I remember a piece of my heart just being like, oh my gosh, like I just want to watch this girl as she grows. And seeing you over the last few years just bring balance into your life and do the things you may never have done before. And you now are fully walking out. And it's so amazing to see your journey in the short years that I have known you. But to hear about where you started is going to be very powerful for our audience to get to dive into. So I would love for you to just talk to us about, where you were, as a child growing up, where mental health played a role in your life, because I know that it was a huge role that it played in your life growing up. So take us through your journey, take us through your life. Tell us what it was like. What did you experience? What did you feel? And how have you been able to bring yourself back into balance now? So the floor is yours, and please take us on your life's journey.
Absolutely. Okay, so my whole journey definitely started as a child where, now that I think back to it, I definitely was an anxious child. I overthought everything. I was a very internal thinker. I would internalize a lot of things. And throughout school years, I found I was always drawn away from students my age, but always hanging out with adults. So I was definitely like the odd one out. And my journey definitely took a turn for the worse in grade 7. So my grandfather and my dad and my uncle were diagnosed with cancer within a month. So picture, 12-year-old Nadia, who all of a sudden has all these different fears of an outcome or fears the future of what was going to happen with those situations. So that's kind of where it started, as to, I think, the overthinking and fearing what would happen. When my uncle and my grandfather, they had passed within a week and my dad had survived, but I started to just really start to feel off. And I thought it was the grieving process, but there was just something that wasn't right. And I noticed it started to change when about a week and a half later was my 13th birthday. And my sister took me out. We picked up a couple of girlfriends of mine. They all lived pretty close to my house. So what happened was each time we were picking someone up, I felt just really off and I didn't know what was happening. And I felt kind of detachment from reality. We'd be driving on the highway on our way to the movie theater, and I felt like everything around me was either moving slower or quicker. I couldn't catch my breath. And I just sat there and I'm like, okay, is this the grieving process? Like, I'm not too sure what's happening. And we get to the movie theater, and this is when I had my first anxiety attack, and it was scary. So I remember even just being in the movie theater, the smell of popcorn was making me sick. Even the smell of water just smelled disgusting to me at that point. And I remember we were going into the movie theater to take our seats. And I looked at my sister and I'm like, I just need to go to the washroom. I need to, just rinse my face off with some water. And next thing you know, I'm at the bottom of the stairs by the movie screen, and it's almost like I collapsed because I'm looking at this big movie screen. So my sister ended up calling her husband, and he took me home. And it was from that day forward, it took me a couple days to recoup, and it was just not what I expected at all. And I felt so bad. My friends stayed along to finish the movie and go out after, but for me, that was just something I didn't ever want to experience again. So in my mind, I was like, well, I'm just not going to go to the movie theaters anymore, because if I do, that's going to happen again. And I remember going to my doctor's, I believe it was maybe a week or so later, and talking about the grieving process. And it was shortly after that they had diagnosed me with generalized anxiety disorder and social anxiety disorder. And about 2 minutes later, I was handed my first prescription, and they said, this is just going to help you within the first couple weeks to get into grade 8 at the time. And I was on it for 8 years. But it was interesting because as soon as I started with the medications, it actually made my anxiety a lot worse, to the point where in social situations, I would have a lot of anxiety, but now all of a sudden I was having up to 20 hours of anxiety attacks a day. And it could be on the range of a 10, where I'm in a fetal position on the floor, or at a 2 or 3. But even when my body was at a 2 or 3 with anxiety, it's almost like my mind was like, oh, you're experiencing a little bit of anxiety. And then boom, it's almost like I manifested it to get to a 10. And that was my life for a couple years. And I started to go to high school, and things just got worse from there, missed a lot of school. And I just didn't want to be a burden on people. So I stopped socializing. It was to the point where I couldn't even eat through dinner with my parents. I couldn't, I remember in grade 9 phys ed class, when all the girls would, for example, go to change, I had to be in a stall by myself. Like, there was just any sort of exposure to a social situation, you would not find me in it. And that was how everything started to play out. And then I started to realize that, one thing that also happened was, because I was so young, I treated anxiety as something physical. So I'm thinking, I see a lot of people who break a leg, or maybe are diagnosed with cancer, and they go through all these different treatments or surgery. And I remember as a young kid, I would research on my phone or my computer, like, is there surgery that can remove the anxiety from my brain? And there was nothing. And I wasn't given any options of what to do. It was kind of just live with it, take it day by day. I was told that there was nothing that can be done, that this is something I'd experience for the rest of my life. And I think it was with that I realized, maybe I'm not meant for this. Maybe this is something that I deserve. Kind of like a punishment. I didn't know what type of punishment, but it was something I thought I did deserve. So it was up until about 16 that between the ages of about 15 and 16, I started to slip into depression, realizing that this was my life and there was no exit point. And my anxiety attacks started to get more intense. They would show up out of nowhere. The one thing I don't miss about anxiety is that, anxiety had no schedule. I could be doing something completely safe, nothing that would put my body in a fight or flight mode, and then all of a sudden an anxiety attack would pop up. So I withdrew from friends and family. My room became my safe space, but also wasn't my safe space, because you're alone with your thoughts, and it got scary at times. And so when I was about 15 or 16, when the depression slipped in, I started waking up every day crying because I was sad that I waked up. I was sad that I woke up, and I was just hoping that I would pass away in my sleep. And all these scary thoughts started to pop up of like, well, you're not meant to be here. So my mind started going through patterns of like, okay, how can you escape this now? And it got scary. And it was until the age of 16 that I admitted myself into the hospital. at Max Sick Kids into the mental health ward.
So you
And
admitted
that
to
was,
yourself, like you willingly were like, I need to do this. I need
yeah, I willingly, I believe, I think it was like January 2nd or something, where I remember it was a couple weeks before Christmas that I was in my room alone crying. I think I was in my fourth hour of an anxiety attack. And I looked at my bottle of pills and I'm like, do I just end it here? And I picked it up and I just threw it across the room because I was so scared. And it was at that moment, I think it was like the biggest wake up call of, no, there has to be something you can do about this. And I admitted myself, I packed up my suitcase, like a mini suitcase. And that was the first exposure to me as to how broken the system was and still is. So I remember when going to the hospital, I think it was like a 6-hour assessment, so many different questions. And after, speaking with the nurses and everything in the crisis line, they had said, well, you're not sick enough and we don't really have a bed for you. And I'm just sitting there and I'm bawling. I'm like, listen, I've been experiencing this for now 4 years. And also as a kid, also having a bit of anxiety here and there, but not recognizing it. I said, I'm tired of living like this and I'm not leaving until you find me a bed. And then I think 20 minutes later, magically appeared was a bed. And so that was my first kind of initial reaction as to like, why
even
is
though
it?
they knew that you had debated on taking all your pills, they knew that you had considered ending it right there. And, they still weren't able to, they still didn't think that was serious enough.
Yeah, they were ready to send me home. Yeah.
Wow.
And so I remember, being part of the mental health ward. I was there for about 3 days. And I started to realize that the things that I needed to speak about or cope with, it wasn't being addressed. So there was a lot of like classroom talk about drug abuse, alcohol abuse, which was great. I'm so glad that they learned those things, but I didn't use any of that. And I remember speaking to the doctor and I said, listen, I'm needing some type of one-on-one counseling. And I actually lied to them. I said, I'm not suicidal anymore. And I was still very in the depths of it. I said, I'm not suicidal anymore. I want to go home and I want to get some therapy. And the head doctor was like, oh, yeah, not a problem. We can send you home. And my parents came in for an initial meeting and they diagnosed me with panic disorder. So they said it was very close to agoraphobia, which pretty much you do not leave your house or your room or anything. You're not going into a social situation. Sometimes if you trust someone and you go with them, but even in the initial response of an anxiety attack, you're right back at your safe space. So he goes, you're pretty close to that, but he goes, well, we'll leave you with panic disorder. And they changed around my medications because it was to the point where, I was first given a round of medication. It wasn't doing enough. So they put me at its fullest dose. Then they put me on a second medication that was kind of take it as you need it. So every time you have an anxiety attack or feel anxiety coming on, take one. And I'm like, well, buddy, I'm going to need a bottle a day. Like you're working with someone who has anxiety every hour of the day. So the doctors there put me on like a 24-hour version of it. And I said, well, I'm needing some therapy. I need to work with someone one-on-one. And they said, well, cognitive behavioral therapy, also known as CBT, is going to be a 1-year wait. And that was my second exposure as to how broken and unavailable the system was. And I looked at my parents, I looked at the doctor, and I know that most people at my age wouldn't say this. They'd probably just accept it and move on. But I pretty much said, okay, so if I have to wait another year to see someone, just my first appointment, the next time you see me, I'll be 6 feet under. And he looked at me and was just startled at the response. And he goes, oh, okay, we're going to find you something or someone. And magically appeared a psychiatrist about a week later. And I started some very intensive therapy because I did not know how to socialize. I couldn't go to Fortino's or Walmart with my mom without having anxiety. I couldn't go to the movie theater or the mall with my friends. I couldn't sit in my classroom, my science class for more than 10 minutes without having to leave and take a breather.
And at
So
this point, were you mainly having anxiety about being in a social situation? And have you linked this originally to your grandfather and uncle passing? Like, do you feel like that was sort of a catalyst to this? And then every social event or experience from that moment forward just kept getting kind of layering on top of each other? Or had you identified at this point what really was your trigger?
mm, I totally think that that grade 7 incident with all the cancer running through the family, I definitely think that was the catalyst to really um, opening myself into all of these emotions. Because as a kid, I felt every emotion. You know, even my parents worked as foster parents, so even being exposed to a lot of situations and things like that. But that initial event, I really believe, jump started it, but also the movie theater incident, where in my mind it was like, okay, so every time you're in a social situation now, Nadia, you're going to go through that exact same experience. And for the longest time, I couldn't even go in the car with my sister
Mhm.
because my mind was like, well, your first anxiety attack was with her. She's a trigger.
Yeah.
So I was very
Really
picky.
interesting how the subconscious mind works, and
Yeah.
I talked about that in the pilot episode, which was my story. I made a very long 12-year journey condensed into 20 minutes, but um, I found that same thing where I had a trigger my entire life. I had my first traumatic moment at the age of 4 years old. On a school bus, and then every single event in life that had to do with a bathroom after that school bus was a trigger for me. And learning until it catapulted at the age of 22 when I had my first panic attack, and then the panic attacks went from one, when I would get in a car, to then one every single day, then to five every single day. And it's interesting because once we learn, and you're talking about, a broken system, and when we become, and I know you're going to get there in your story, but when we become self-educated on, what, I'm taking back my health into my own hands, and I'm learning about what the heck is actually happening in my body, because I still don't feel like I understand what's going on, and learning about the subconscious mind and learning how its role in our lives are to actually protect us from ever experiencing a traumatic moment again. So if your trauma had to do with a social situation, your subconscious mind is your best friend. It is your friend, and it is there to go, oh whoa, we're in another social situation, Nadia, we don't want to go down this again, we don't want this to happen again. And it sounds the alarms, and the alarms is those the feelings of anxiety, right? The palpitating heart, the tingling fingers, the digestive issues, all of that comes along with the alarms. And the alarms are just our friend, our subconscious mind, going, whoa, 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 last time we were here, this was not good. This was not good, so we're not going here again. It's that survival mechanism. So I find it's almost so helpful to hear stories where, oh my gosh, yours did that too, we must all be designed the same way, because that is really how it works. So continue on with your story there. Sorry, I just had to intercede with that subconscious mind piece, because that really is what is happening. Even for anyone listening, if you struggle with something like this is actually your best friend sounding the alarms, because it does not want you to feel pain again, right? So it's a matter of us then helping our subconscious mind understand that we're actually totally safe.
Yeah. And you know what? I remember, and it's true, because even my life coach talks about that, where she goes, your body is so brilliant to keep you in that safe space. The issue is, a lot of the times it's an irrational fear, right? And it's crazy at the same time to think how strong the subconscious is, that even now, so almost, I don't know, 8 or 9 years later, I still have an issue carpooling with people, because my first experience was when carpooling with people. So now, I fear letting people down if I get sick. I don't want to ruin their experience. And just almost a decade later, it's still like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I just had to add that in because I find it so fascinating that it can carry on that long.
And I do feel that it's a matter of giving yourself grace too, right? It's a matter of saying, you know what, I have come so far, and I want you to talk about, you know, where you are now in your journey, but I have come so far and I'm now doing things I would never have been able to do before. So if one thing is that I'm still not there yet with the carpooling, I'll get there one day, but I'm just
Mhm.
not there yet. And that's totally okay,
Mhm.
because I will take where I am today over where I was 5 years ago. And
So
I'm
true.
the same way with airplanes still. I'm not there yet. We still have to book a seat in the back of the plane, last row, where you can't you can't recline your seat, right
Mhm.
beside the bathroom. My poor husband. But at the end of the day, he's like, I'll take your airplane, you know, crazy ways of having to fly
Yeah.
and when I have to go to the bathroom, and like I know when I can go last, when the, you know, flight attendant's going down and she's halfway down shutting all the doors. I'm like, damn, my last time to go to the bathroom. Like I have this thing timed to a T, but I'll
Mhm.
take that over never being able to fly at all. I'll take that over never being able to speak in front of audiences. So I think it's really amazing to see how far we can come, and then to give ourselves grace, compassion with the things that aren't there yet, and knowing
Mhm.
that okay, maybe it will take 2 more years until flights now are off my radar and now they're a comfort for me, but until that point I'm okay with doing it the way that I'm doing it, because so many other things have been opened up and have, you know, I can do now that I wasn't able to do for a decade.
Absolutely.
So let's
Absolutely.
talk about where you are right now. Like, how has your journey shifted? Was there a turning point when you were able to move into, you know, the lifestyle and the way of life that you have now?
Absolutely. So my when I was in college, I had a class that my prof had said, you know, we're going to have some guest speakers. And it was based on stress management. And I almost didn't go to the class because, you know, sometimes we want to skip it, we're exhausted. And something, that gut feeling said, Nadia, you need to be at this class. So at that point, you know, I had gone through 8 months of therapy. It was supposed to be 3, but they kept extending it for me because I was so still really needing a lot of help. You know, fast forward a couple of year or two, and I was still experiencing a bit of depression. I was still experiencing anxiety attacks. I just knew how to cope with it a bit better, but they were still present in my life, and I wasn't fully recovered yet. And it was this lecture that truly changed my life. So, 2 guest speakers came in, and they were talking about, you know, gut and brain connection, how anxiety impacts our daily life, using essential oils for our anxious feelings that we get every day. And I'm sitting there in so much gratitude, but I was also honestly so upset that I did not learn these tools or had no idea about these things when I was 12. And, you know, in terms of even gut and brain connection, I remember for the longest time, my family doctor would be like, "Oh, she just has food poisoning. She'll be fine." And my mom's like, "Well, okay, food poisoning for 4 months straight. We know her digestive system is off from the anxiety. You know, we need to address this." And they said, "Well, you know, just drink some orange juice, eat some chicken for protein, and just go outside." But there was a disconnect there because she knew that my anxiety was so bad that going outside was a mission impossible for me. So when hearing these speakers talk about, you know, gut and brain connection and how, and I love that you say this too, food affects your mood. I started thinking about all of this, and I'm like, why didn't I learn this stuff before? So my journey had shifted when I told the people who were speaking, and I said, listen, I have a trip to New York in a couple weeks, and then I'm soon after going on a trip to Jamaica. And I said, every trip that I've been on, I either don't go on because the anxiety is so bad. Like it could even be a week before and my anxiety is already at a 10. And I said, I need to get through these trips. One of them I'm being marked for. Like our New York trip was our class trip. I had to be there. And I said, just give me something that's going to support the anxiousness that I feel 24/7. And she gave me a roller bottle of vetiver. And she says, I just want you to roll this bottoms of your feet, you know, 2 to 3 times a day, and we'll see what happens. And I'm like, okay, hokey pokey, but there's something about this that I'm really interested about. And sure enough, I kept consistent with it. And that was the first trip that I went on with no anxiety. And I was blown away. I was like, okay, give me a case of this stuff. I'm in love. And that's where the journey started. I then
And vetiver is an essential oil for
yes,
those who may not know.
yes, and I loved as much as I hated the smell of vetiver. It smells like wet dirt. Now I can use it as a perfume. I love it. But what I loved about it is it's kind of like walking into the forest barefoot, where it's kind of going to give you that same grounding effect. And that's what it did for me. It kept me grounded. It kept my mind quiet. And it was at that turning point that I started to look at other things and look at my body as a whole, as my body as a whole, as a holistic approach. I wanted to look at my mind, my body, my spirit, my emotions, everything. And I started to look at my food intake, and I first removed eating meat. And what was so interesting was even just a couple days after removing meat, my anxiety went from a 10 to a 2. I was blown away as to how quickly it worked. But then I started to learn about a few different things. So, for example, I'm a very kind of like energy sensitive person. I take on people's emotions, I internalize it. I've done that since I was a kid. What I noticed with eating animals was, they go through their own fight or flight response, and they go through their own adrenaline rush. What was happening was I was consuming that as well. So when I started to remove the meat, anxiety gone. It was minimal. And I was, again, blown away by what was happening. I started to I wasn't a coffee drinker, hate drinking tea, so I didn't have to worry about any caffeine-based drinks. I removed processed sugars. I then started to remove eggs and dairy. And it was about 4 months later, after doing the food changes and starting to be more mindful, that I actually went to my doctor and I said, listen, I want to get off my medications. I've been on them for 8 years. I've been changing my food habits and I'm more grounded. And he goes, well, you've been through a very highly addictive 8 years, and this is going to be difficult, but it can be possible. And needless to say, because my changes were so drastic, I was able to get off of them within a couple weeks. And I'm so happy that as well with that journey, he has been that person under my care and doing that under his supervision to be able to take me on that journey of understanding that I have now taken on a holistic approach with things. And now I kind of want to detach from the stuff in the past that probably no longer served my body at that point. And I'm
That's
so
very smart that you did. I'm very smart that you did it under doctor's care.
yes.
I quit cold turkey. I was on same as you. I was on medication for 8 or 9 years, and it was highly addictive. And I decided to get off of it because the withdrawal symptoms were so bad. Even if I would miss that one pill by an hour, that I decided to I'm just going to get off this stuff. This is not good for my body. And I did it without a doctor's supervision. And I was in an extreme withdrawal state for about 5 days. It was like a severe flu. So I'm happy that you've actually brought that up, because there can be a very different side if we choose to do that without the slow weaning off process. I'm actually glad you brought that up.
Yes. I know a lot of people are like, well, okay, great, I'm going to get off mine too. And it's like, no, you have to be mentally ready for it, definitely. And doing it under the care of a healthcare professional, because sometimes anxiety can get worse in that situation, or depression can get worse. So I was super happy. I mean, now this August, I'll be 2 years medication free. And it has been the most liberating years of my life, because I always used to tell people the medication side effects were worse than the illnesses itself. I remember throughout high school, I'd have such bad memory loss to the point where I couldn't remember my locker combo, and my friend beside me, I couldn't remember her name, let alone, test dates and memorizing stuff for quizzes and all that stuff. But it has turned out to be a journey that I would do all over again if it meant being where I am today. And I'm so thankful of how it was laid out, because I think even at the age of 12, if I wasn't given the holistic options, maybe I wouldn't have taken it as seriously as I do now.
Yeah,
So
having gone through the deeper valley first.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So take us through, as we kind of wrap up your journey, um, this point now, you are now an educator on essential oils. You teach other people how to use emotional aromatherapy and mind mood management, natural plant-based remedies, so to give their bodies what their bodies need to heal itself and bring their bodies back into balance. You also you left college to actually pursue your passion, which turned to food and turned to nutrition. So now, as a vegan, you went and took your certification at the Hippocrates Institute in Florida.
Mhm.
So you did that last year, correct?
Yes, it was last year.
So you
Mhm.
got your certification, and then you're also still very heavily involved in the mental health sector, though, helping youth and whatnot. Correct?
Yes. So I remember my journey first started with a bit of stigma reduction throughout college and things like that. But once my journey shifted into caring for my body and again taking my health back into my own hands, I still advocate for the stigma of things and reducing it. But then it's also taken a turn as to, there are so many options that you can, or so many paths that you can take to care for your body, that many don't know about. It's actually
Yeah.
scary that people don't understand the depths of, mindfulness and even meditation, something I thought was hokey pokey. Now I love it.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's
That's
great.
beautiful. That's so awesome. I love, just hearing how you were able to shift that. And again, just going back to like the lifestyle changes that you made, right? And switching to plant-based. And not everyone's going to be plant-based, but being able to make those shifts and reducing stimulations and all of that. Like, food is mood, right? Like, your mood is going to be a trigger of what you put into your body. So that being such a huge component of your journey. So, any last nugget you want to share with our audience or viewers? If there's one thing that you can tell anyone who's going through something similar, what would be that one thing?
As simple as it sounds, honestly, don't give up. And I used to take those words lightly, but now I seriously mean it. If I would have given up at the age of 16 and, taken my own life, or not trusted my gut with the direction that I was going. And sometimes, people are, they're looking for, that light at the end of the tunnel.
Mhm.
And now what I've started to realize is that light will never be there. It's never out there somewhere. It's always going to be within. And what I love about that is there are people around you who are going to help you reignite that flame within, or reignite that light within. Because I started to have people come into my life who helped me get through the tough times. So, with grade 11, for example, being my worst year for my mental health, all of a sudden there was one girl who just popped up, and she as well had a mental illness, and she helped me through so many different social situations. If it meant sitting in the car for an hour while I bawled my eyes out before we could enter, the ballroom for our prom, she was sitting there. So you're going to always, just be mindful of those that pop into your life, because they're there for a reason and they're there to help you.
Mhm.
And, I've come across a lot of people who have said, I've tried reaching out to people, but no one wants to listen. I say keep going, because I have met people who've gone through 8 psychiatrists and finally find the right one that fits for them. So it's just as simple as it is, don't give up. But then not giving up can be viewed in many different ways,
Mhm.
whether it's, giving up or not giving up until you find the right person to talk to, or the right treatment, or ways that are going to support your mental health. So yeah, just don't give up, because there truly is a light that will reignite within you and help you heal.
I love that. I love that. That's so beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Nadia. And we're gonna pop up, how people can connect with you here. They can connect with you on Facebook, as well as, if they want to shoot you an email, if they have any questions about what you, about your story, about your journey, or anything that you said here as well. We'll pop up your email address here in the credits. So thank you, Nadia, for sharing your heart, your journey, your raw, real story and experience with us. And I really appreciate you popping on and being able to share that with our audience, and someone, who may be going through something similar to you that you've just provided hope for.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Beautiful. All right. So stay tuned for our next episode, and you will always be available to watch these on our social media platforms. Take care, everyone. Bye.